I'm riding along or flying along Philadelphia's landscape, and I'm looking at it, and I'm there. And I'm looking at different little buildings, little spaces, and shapes like that, and I'm putting them down here. But I'm in my mind's eye, I'm riding along like I always have. I'm just picking out certain aspects of the landscape. But I keep going over this site over and over again. I'll ride the Market Frankfurt and I'll look at some areas over and over again. And I'll ride on trolley, which I do on trolley cars down in the area on Haverford Avenue, or buses and cars on Lancaster. So I want to get the feel, the way our brains work when it comes to visuals. The first part of the process of you actually seeing and knowing is that first you have an impression, and then it gets further refined as it feeds further back into your different areas of your brain. You get feedback on, okay, what is that? What does it relate to? What emotions are connected to it? Or why is it there? What does it mean to me, etc. That's really what I'm doing right now, is an impression, so that you'll feel that you're in a certain section of West Philadelphia. So this one, Horticultural Center, and sort of this is going to be sort of maybe to give a little hint, possibly to pour a little zoo, little cages or something like that. I'm thinking about maybe zap from that and then zapping this down into the river. I don't know yet, but I'm traveling along that way. I consider the Market Frankfurt to be almost like my viewing platform for Philadelphia. My perspective tends to be of someone who's standing at the L platform looking across the city. These things really, for me, are more like a musical score. I'm just trying to get rhythm and shade and determine where I'm going to put my darks and my lights. And once I get my darks and lights composed and set up, then I can start really thinking about my color scheme or whatever, and the signage and the things that I want to choose. That's still part of a process that's going to be going on. This is just a preliminary, and lots of times something like this, it'll change.
I have lived here in this home and studio in the Callow Hill / Chinatown North neighborhood since before it was called either of those names, since 1979, so I've been here for 33 years. I've seen it develop an identity, and I think I've been sort of a part of that too, from the work I've been doing in terms of trying to help the neighborhood develop in a good way. It took me a while to realize that I was documenting my life and documenting change. And now that it's been 33 years, say, since I finished school, I think I was just painting what I knew, painting what was close to me. And then that turned into documenting a life. When I came to Philadelphia to start school, I was very excited to live in a downtown urban area. And I liked Philadelphia for, you know, the things it had to offer, as well as for the things that maybe weren't so great about it. You know, it was gritty. It's still gritty. It was even grittier then in the mid-70s. Philadelphia has changed a lot over the years, and my neighborhood has changed. My neighborhood took a little longer to change. Because my work is autobiographical, I think you can see some of that history. Now looking back on 30-plus years of work, you can kind of see some of that history in the city in terms of, especially in my neighborhood, because I do paint my neighborhood, my surroundings constantly.
I have a friend that sent me, I think it was on Facebook, saying she could see Pookie's house in one of the paintings I showed, because it strikes that sort of a familiar chord with you. So that's what I'm doing right now. Is I just want to make sure I have the right feel, and I'll sit down and I'll look at this and contemplate it for a while and make adjustments over time until I feel that I'm ready to go to the next stage, which means the next time you see this will be drenched with various films and shades of colors and things like that. My choice of color in my application is influenced by Philadelphia and the wear and tear I see in the community and the many layers that I see, which for me are like pages of a book or of a novel. That Philadelphia blue sky, boy. That pretty blue sky. I don't know about Philly, but it has a pretty sky, boy. A lot of days, boy, you look at that sky, the prettiest blue. Great clouds. That's what I like about this. But I look out there, boy. Sometimes I'll come back in, change my sky, because the sky outside was so terrific and incredible. I've ridden on the Mark and Frankfurt L all of my life. Most of these works, in some ways, were colored by my experiences as a child, and I try to demonstrate that with my love for the city and the color and composition I find in it. You know, Bearden used trains to talk about the migration from the south to the north. So you see that as one of his symbols. One of the things I've done, I have a repertoire of shapes and things like that. For me, the L is like that too, just in a sense of movement and time. From a bus or from the L looking out the window. These are the things you see as they flash by, sometimes faster than you can really record at that moment.
Tricks, good girl, come on. We are at the John Hines National Wildlife Refuge in South Philadelphia. It used to be called Tinicum Wildlife Refuge. It's down here at the end of South Philly, right next to the airport, and also goes partly into Delaware County. It's amazing that there's a wildlife refuge right here next to Philadelphia International Airport and the industrial park area down here, and we're like literally 10 minutes from Center City, Philadelphia, yet we're in a wildlife refuge. So it's, you know, you're totally transported to a different place. And it's amazing that we have places like this that we can get to so quickly in the middle of a very big city. When I thought about making a work of art for the youth center, I started thinking about the city of Philadelphia, first of all. And because I wanted it to somehow be about the whole city, I started thinking about like, what's a way to show that? And I started thinking about all the great parks that I love to go to. I started thinking about parks I had not been to. So to come up with the idea, I first went around to all these parks in Philadelphia and made small on-site sketches of different scenes in these parks. And I went to parks I knew well, like the Wissahickon, and I went to parks I didn't know barely at all, like Tacony Park and Pennypack Park. I just went to all these different places and made these quick studies and also took snapshots and made notes. And then I brought them home and I kind of laid them out and looked at them. And then I used the map of Philadelphia, roughly a topographical map with the, the Schuylkill River on the west and the Delaware River on the east, and used that as the composition to sort of then fit in these individual parks to create a sort of wacky composite park that represents Philadelphia. Okay, so if we start on the upper left, we're in the Wissahickon Park in winter. This is the Wissahickon Creek. This is the Schuylkill River here. That's the big bridge, Henry Avenue. This is Devil's Pool. The Finger Bridge, Jody Pinto's great public art piece. And then as you move away from the Wissahickon and also away from winter, now it's raining. It's like a spring rain, and here's mountain laurel. There's a lot of mountain laurel in the Wissahickon. And this upper right part is in the far northeast, Fox Chase Farm. There's actually a farm up there that's part of the Fairmount Park system. So Fox Chase and Pennypack Park, that's like a bandstand area. Here's some daylilies. To me, that's a real spring indicator of spring, as is Forsythia. And this is Tacony Park, which Tacony Park actually has a golf course in it. So that's what that is. And then we come down here, it's summertime, and we're in the John Hines Wildlife Refuge, which has this beautiful walk that you go around this big body of water and this boardwalk that crosses through. And there's me and Trixie, and I have my Philly's head on. And there's the turtle that's hard to see because he's hiding in the green muck algae, and there's a heron. And then this is FDR Park, which is in South Philly. This would be Broad, that's Spring Garden, because I have it, the viaduct crossing there. Because I sort of used just particular roads as if they were trails through a park. So then summer's leaving, and now we're in the fall, and we're over in West Philly at Bartram's Garden. And here's the bald eagle that just caught a fish here, right by Bartram's cider press. There's the Franklinia tree. This is Clark Park with dogs playing. And this is Cobbs Creek Parkway. There's some new trees with little gator bags. And then fall, and the trees are losing their leaves, and we're back in winter. So it has these sort of places, very specific places, that I think are meaningful, and to the city and to all the people who live here and visit these places. And you can visit those things and then move on, and then have those sort of more quiet moments as you're going through the sky or going down the river to the next place. It's about time, and it's about change, and all these different components put together.
Collage is really one of my main tools in the process that I use to create my works. I started doing it almost unconsciously. It really wasn't a conscious thing for me to start. It's just one of the things that came about in my work. I like process. I enjoy drawing, painting, poking at my work. In my paintings and in my sculpture, I try to get a little bit of everything that I like to do into it because I like to do so many things with I like working with my hands. I have certain stock images, I might call them. For instance, all these images really are basic old Philadelphia architecture or architectural elements. I'm looking at textures and color. I think things like this are so rich. I enjoy trying to reproduce them in paint. And sometimes I'll collage, then I really work my palette, as I say, to match these. I frequently in my pieces will also add glare and drips and things because the things I'm depicting and the places I'm depicting are not clean, geometric structures. There's an overlay over our formal structure of humanity, and that's what I'm trying to show. I have some pigeons there. I like to have birds in my paintings as well. People always leave the pigeons out. You see all these urban paintings and stuff like that. Pigeons. They're good observers, see? They watch us to see what we're doing. As a pedestrian, you get to see Philadelphia from a different, grittier perspective. I think of these much like neighborhoods, and that a neighborhood is a place that you couldn't necessarily understand by just walking down one street. You'd have to at least walk around a block or walk several blocks. Philadelphia is a city of neighborhoods and it's still sort of like that a great deal. If you look, you'll see college students, Muslims, you'll see churches, you'll see, I try to get a chunk from every part of Philadelphia, but at the same time with a particular area and get a certain feel.
My work is autobiographical and it's narrative. So every painting is basically telling a story or a part of a story. And whether it be something very mundane, say sleeping or walking down the street, or whether it be something much more sort of life-altering. They're all sort of parts of the whole story. The story of this painting is that it's about the things that were happening in my life during the time I was working on it. I started in the summer of '09 when I first was doing my sketches to come up with the idea. And then I spent, a number of months making the big full-size paper study. And then I started making the painting. The predominant medium I work in is egg tempera, so it's a very old medium. It was used a lot in the Italian Renaissance before oil paint became the predominant painting medium. It is pigment that I mix into a paste with water, and then egg yolk is added as the binder that holds the pigment together. I love the process part of it, because it's kind of a meditative thing that you're doing before you actually paint, where you're, just focus on color and you're working on this glass palette and mixing up these colors, and it's like thinking about what I'm going to be doing as I'm mixing up my colors for the day. A little bit of water. The The egg yolk is the binder for the pigment. For instance, with oil paint, the oil is the binder. In this case, the egg yolk is the binder that holds the particles of the pigment together. And the water is simply the medium. Egg tempera has the ability to do what I love to do, which is to sort of like throw down a wash of color, then add some detail, and then maybe put a glaze of color over that. It's sort of flat and bright and luscious and colorful, and it's just perfect for high-key colors. Because of using the direct pigments, it just maintains this intense color. This is a project that's been going on for over 2 years. And during that time, like more stuff was happening with the Reading Viaduct project, which is this advocacy effort I'm very involved in. So like that was going to be in there. It was going to be depicted in some small way. And like I mentioned, I lost a really close friend. And so she ended up being in there because during that time, you know, was when she got sick and then she died. And I wanted to remember her, and so I put her in that painting. Down on the Schuylkill by Bartram's cider press, there's a bald eagle that just caught a fish. And when I was at Bartram's garden just last summer, I actually saw that. I saw a bald eagle catch a fish. So that was so amazing, I had to put it in the painting. It makes perfect sense to me that it's this seasonal thing that shows years and nature and weather and time moving, and just the circular, you know, every year it just comes back around again, winter, spring, summer, fall.
I'm an arrow shot from God's bow. Arrows don't stop till they reach the target. I had this, for me, when my transformation, I had no choice. You know, once it happened to me, I was 22 years old, and my whole life just, is when I touched clay in a potter's wheel for the first time. That did a zoink, and that did it. My destiny was set. It was set. After that, I really realized I couldn't keep doing what other people were doing because that was a waste of time. This is the only thing I think is important. I mean, it's the only thing that really occupies me and bothers me. I go to sleep thinking about these things. And in spite of all my other difficulties with the computer and business and property and this and that, these are my major concerns. And the guppies. Yeah. Little guppies. I believe that it's important to speak to the younger generation, and particularly with art, because most of them are exposed to flat, two-dimensional images on a TV screen. Doesn't give you very much time to analyze anything. You don't have a chance to stop and really think about what you're seeing or what's being fed to you. And art like this gives people the time to stop, to look, and maybe get a message that they're not getting from our media. There's very little, I believe, discussion anymore about the content of what we're viewing. We don't investigate visually anymore. It's a little bit too passive. I think that art pieces like this are something that engages a person's mind as well as their eye. I like the mixture of chunks of color and then the lines, but what I really got from Picasso, for instance, he scribbled a lot, you know, and he wasn't too hung up. He wasn't all disturbed about trying to prove to somebody that he was a good artist. You know, he knew who he was, you know, so he really, that's the whole thing, is trying to get to relax, I feel. You have faith in yourself. You have to have faith in your inner artist. Try to keep this thing from criticizing you, telling you what's right and wrong or what not to do. That's why it's better to keep going blind. Tell you, I don't know what I'm doing. Good. Whew. Art museums are filled with people who were not conforming to the standard, people who were considered not orthodox.
City in all its kinetic and frenetic energy.
We're all unique, we're all individuals, we all have our own voice. And this is mine. Yeah. This is mine.
When I was in school at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, I started sort of looking at bigger pictures even when I was in, say, figure painting classes. Instead of, I'd be in a large room, you know, a big studio room with a lot of other students, and there'd be a model in the center of the room, and we're all painting the model. But rather than just painting the model, I would paint the entire room, the architecture. I remember painting big columns and all the other students around painting. So I started looking at my surroundings in that way while I was in school. I bought this building and it was very run down, and so I painted it as in its state when I first got it, and then as I slowly fixed it up to a home and studio. The studio is the biggest room in the house. And I spend a lot of time in here. I probably spend more of my time in here, except for maybe sleeping. The studio is a very important place because it's where the work is made, and then a lot of the work is sort of about my history as an artist by depicting the studio over the years as it changes, as I change, as the work changes. I have these themes that I constantly return to. Self-portraits, life stories, travel, home and community, home and garden, bathing, sleeping, but I basically consider all my paintings self-portraits, even if I'm not in them. There might be a painting of my studio where there's work in progress, and I consider that as much a self-portrait as a headshot self-portrait. People can see the work out in the public realm in a gallery or when I've painted public murals, and they can read my story, but they can also bring their own story to it. And often people do that. They'll have some similar situation in their life that they can bring and say, oh, I understand that because this happened to me, or I do this. So I'm putting myself out in the world as sort of being the witness, sort of watching, you know, all the paintings I've done of the neighborhood over the years, sort of watching how the neighborhood has changed and how Philadelphia has changed. And then again, painting myself. I've painted myself over the years. And you know, my hair is turning gray, I'm getting older, you change, your body changes. And I think it's really interesting to record that and depict it. By documenting my life, but by doing it with painting, with art, it's also, in fact, sometimes I use the term creative nonfiction, because it's not strict documentary. It's not strictly factual. There's a lot of imagination and editing, self-editing, and embellishing, so that it's not exactly truth, but it's my own kind of truth. And artists, because you know we sort of see things in very sort of specific personal ways, you get You know, in my case, you're getting my personal vision. But it is a personal vision of a sort of universal time period and a sort of way of life, a way of living.